If everything in your life is falling apart right now, it may not be because God is done with you. It may be because He's preparing you for what you were born to carry. There is a moment when the noise of your life suddenly goes silent. The messages stop. The plans collapse. The people you thought would stay forever become strangers. You sit on the edge of your bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything you built could fall apart this fast. It feels like God closed every door, shattered every dream, and left you alone in a room full of broken pieces. But what if this is not the end of your story? What if this is the exact place where God is secretly preparing you for the very thing you were born to carry? Brokenness is painful, but inside it, something holy, precise, and intentional is happening. This message is for the ones who feel like life has taken a hammer to everything they thought was secure. It is for the quiet souls who smile in public but fall apart in private, for the ones who whisper prayers they are no longer sure anyone hears. It is for the person who did everything right, followed every rule, gave their best, and still watched the ground open beneath their feet. If that is you, hear this. Brokenness is not a divine accident. There is a pattern in the way God prepares people, and that pattern often includes seasons that feel like loss, emptiness, and silence. Before every major calling, there is usually a breaking. Before the platform, there is a private crushing. Before the visible assignment, there is a hidden refining. We live in a world that worships strength, confidence, and winning. We are told to move fast, stay loud, show our highlights, and hide our wounds. Yet some of the most powerful work God will ever do in you does not happen under bright lights. It happens in the unseen places. Long nights, tear-stained pillows, unanswered questions, and seasons where nothing seems to move. Maybe you have called this season punishment. Maybe you have said, God must be done with me, or I must have ruined His plan. But what if the opposite is true? What if the very evidence that you are being prepared is the fact that life stopped letting you stay comfortable? What if the doors that closed were not a rejection of you, but a redirection for you? This message matters because too many people quit in the middle of their breaking. They walk away from purpose because they misread preparation as abandonment. They abandon the process because they cannot see the future God is shaping on the other side of the pain. Today, we are going to look at brokenness differently, not as a grave where dreams are buried, but as a ground where new roots quietly begin to grow. So if you are tired, if you are disappointed, if you are standing in the wreckage of plans that did not work, stay with me. You are not listening to this by accident. Somewhere inside you, there is a calling that refuses to die, no matter how many times life has knocked you down. This video is an invitation to see your story through a different lens, to recognize that the cracks in your heart may be the very lines where God is letting His light in, shaping you for something deeper, truer, and far more beautiful than the life you would have chosen on your own. This is not about pretending the pain is easy. It is about discovering that even here, in the shattered parts of your story, God is not finished. He is forming you for what comes next. Imagine a person who never quite fit the mold. From the outside, their life looked fine. They were responsible, kind, and hopeful. They worked hard, made plans, and tried their best to honor God with every choice. People came to them for advice because they seemed steady, unshakable. But what no one saw was how often they lay awake at night, feeling a quiet ache that whispered, "There is more than this. You were made for something else." Year after year, they built a life that made sense on paper. A stable career, familiar relationships, predictable routines. They did not hate any of it, but something inside felt strangely distant, like living in a house that never fully felt like home. They prayed for clarity, for direction, for God to show them their purpose in a way that did not require losing everything. Instead, things began to break, slowly at first. A door closed that they thought was guaranteed. A project they poured their soul into collapsed at the last minute. A relationship they trusted began to fracture under the weight of unspoken disappointment. They tried to hold it all together, to explain it away, to tell themselves it was just a rough season. But then came the wave they could not outrun. The job disappeared without warning. The relationship ended in a way that left their heart in ruins. The community that once felt safe became distant, awkward, uncertain of what to do with their pain. Overnight, the person who used to give strength to others became the one who did not know how to get out of bed. They stopped posting online. They stopped answering messages. They would sit by the window, watching the sun move across the floor, wondering how a life that was once full of motion could become so still. They asked God questions that tasted like salt. Why would you let this happen? Did I disappoint you? Was everything I believed just a story I told myself to feel safe? Silence. Days turned into weeks. The prayers grew shorter. Sometimes, all they could say was, "Help me." Other times, they said nothing at all. They simply stared at the ceiling, tears slipping down their face, hoping that maybe the God they once believed in so fiercely was still somewhere in the room, even if they could not feel him. In that silence, something subtle began to shift. It did not happen with fireworks or angels or sudden miracles. It started with small, almost invisible moments. A line from a song that felt like it was written just for them. A stranger's kindness on a day when they were sure they were invisible. A memory of a dream they had buried years ago because it felt too risky, too wild, too different from the safe life they had been taught to build. One night, unable to sleep, they picked up an old journal. Between the faded ink and messy handwriting, they found pages filled with prayers, ideas, and visions they had once carried in their heart. Helping others heal, speaking life into people who felt unseen, creating something beautiful out of their own pain. Words they had written when hope still felt simple, before the breaking began. Reading those pages, their chest tightened. For the first time, they wondered, had God been preparing them for that kind of work all along? Had the loneliness taught them how to notice the lonely? Had the loss taught them a tenderness they never would have learned in comfort? Had the crushing of their plans quietly made room for a purpose that required more courage, more compassion, more depth than the old life ever demanded? The questions did not erase the pain. The pieces of their life were still scattered across the floor. But something new was forming in the center of the wreckage. A strange, fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, this breaking was not the final chapter. Perhaps it was the uncomfortable doorway into the life they were truly meant to live. They did not have everything figured out. They still woke up some mornings with a heaviness they could not name. Yet beneath the heaviness was a small, steady whisper. Stay. Do not run from this. I am doing something in you that requires the breaking. Brokenness has a way of stripping away everything that is not real. It tears through the layers you built to impress people, protect yourself, and control outcomes. It leaves you standing in the raw truth of who you are when there is nothing left to perform for. As painful as it is, that is often where God does his most precise work. Think of a sculptor standing before a block of stone. To anyone else, it is just rock. But the sculptor sees a figure hidden inside, waiting to be revealed. The only way to bring it out is to chip away everything that does not belong. Each strike of the chisel sounds violent, but it is guided by vision. The stone may feel every blow, yet the sculptor is never trying to destroy it. The sculptor is revealing what has always been there. In seasons of brokenness, you are that stone. The disappointments, the endings, the closed doors, the lonely nights, these are not random strikes from a cruel universe. They are precise places where God is removing what cannot go with you into the next chapter. Pride, fear, dependence on approval. The illusion that you can carry your calling in your own strength. The belief that love must always look like comfort. He is not punishing you. He is preparing you. Sometimes preparation looks like obscurity. While others seem to be sprinting ahead, your life feels like it has been placed in slow motion. The phone stops ringing. Opportunities become rare. The pace you once bragged about sustaining becomes impossible. You are forced to rest, to pause, to be with yourself in a way you have avoided. In that slowing, God whispers things you could never have heard at full speed. Other times, preparation looks like being misunderstood. People who once celebrated you may begin to question you. Not everyone will see the value of what God is doing in your heart. They might call it failure, irresponsibility, or weakness. But often, the very things that seem like backward steps in the eyes of others are the exact steps God is using to move you into alignment with His purpose. Brokenness also exposes where you have been building your identity. When what you do is taken away, you discover who you are. When the relationship ends, you see whether you had placed your worth in being chosen by another human instead of being chosen by God. When the title disappears, you face the question, if I never impress anyone again, am I still valuable? These questions ache, but they are holy questions. They lead you back to a foundation that cannot be shaken. This is where the preparation becomes sacred. In the quiet, God begins to rewrite the scripts that have ruled your life. You are not enough becomes, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. You are alone becomes, I have been with you in every room you thought I was absent from. You have failed becomes, I am using even this to shape you into someone who can carry hope to others. None of this happens overnight. Preparation is rarely dramatic. It is usually slow, repetitive, and hidden. You learn to show up even when no one is clapping. You learn to be faithful in the small things. You learn to listen more than you speak. You learn to let God hold the parts of your story you still do not understand. And somewhere along the way, your brokenness begins to glow, not with the polished shine of perfection, but with the quiet radiance of someone who has walked through fire and still believes in goodness. Your eyes grow softer toward other people's pain. Your words carry a weight they did not have before. Your presence becomes a shelter, not because your life is flawless, but because your wounds have been held by God long enough to become places of wisdom, empathy, and strength. This is the paradox of divine preparation. The very seasons you would never have chosen become the ones you would never trade because of who you became in them. Brokenness did not erase your calling. It carved you into someone who can carry it with humility, courage, and a heart that looks a little more like God's. And that changes everything forever. There comes a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes sharp, when the breaking stops feeling like random chaos and starts to look like a pattern. For the person in our story, that moment did not arrive with trumpets. It came one ordinary afternoon, while they were walking alone, replaying everything they had lost. They noticed how different they felt inside. Not just tired, different. The things that used to drive them no longer held the same power. The desperate need to be approved of. The fear of being misunderstood. The obsession with outcomes. Somewhere, in the months of tears and questions, something had been loosened, emptied, surrendered. They thought about the people who had found their way into their life during that season. The broken ones, the quiet ones, the ones who carried invisible scars. Somehow, conversations with them felt easy, honest, sacred. There was no need to pretend. Pain recognized pain, but also hope recognized hope. Every time they shared even a small piece of their story, someone else felt seen. That afternoon, as the wind brushed past their face, a thought rose inside them with unusual clarity. If I had never been broken like this, I would never be able to love people the way I do now. The sentence stopped them in their tracks. They realized that the compassion, depth, and gentleness they now carried were not gifts that appeared out of nowhere. They had been forged in the very fire they had begged God to remove. Tears filled their eyes. But this time, the tears were different. They were not only tears of grief for what was lost, but tears of gratitude for what had been formed. For the first time, they began to see their story not as a sequence of cruel events, but as a carefully drawn path. Not every detail made sense, but the thread running through it was unmistakable. God had been with them in every valley. This realization did not erase the past. It did not magically fix every consequence, but it shifted the weight on their shoulders. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they began to ask, "What is being born in me because of this?" Instead of seeing themselves as a victim of life's cruelty, they started to see themselves as someone being trusted with a specific kind of empathy, a specific kind of calling. In that shift, something powerful unlocked. Brokenness was no longer just a wound. It became a doorway into a life where their story, with all its cracks and scars, could become a bridge for others to walk across when they felt like they were drowning. And in that moment, they understood. Being prepared by God often looks like being taken apart, so that what remains is true, unshakable, and ready to carry the weight of destiny. This is the quiet birth of true purpose. Now, bring this back to your own life. Maybe you are listening with a lump in your throat because you see yourself in every line of this story. The closed doors, the lonely nights, the questions that never seem to end. You have wondered if God is tired of you, if you somehow stepped outside his plan, if this level of pain could ever be anything but pointless. Hear this, gently but clearly. You are not being discarded. You are being prepared. Prepared to love with a depth that only the broken understand. Prepared to lead without worshiping the spotlight. Prepared to carry responsibility without losing your soul. Prepared to sit with someone else in their darkness without rushing them into a fake version of hope. Prepared to live a life that is not driven by ego, but anchored in purpose. You may not see it yet, but heaven wastes nothing. Not the nights you cried until your chest ached. Not the prayers you whispered through clenched teeth. Not the days you felt like an empty shell moving through routines on autopilot. Every moment has been gathered, held, and woven into a story far larger than the one you would have written for yourself. Does that make the pain easy? No. Does it give you all the answers? It does not. But it does mean you are not walking through this alone, and you are not walking through it for nothing. There is a kind of strength being built in you that cannot be learned from success, applause, or ease. It is the strength of someone who has met God in the valley and discovered that even there, grace is real. So what do you do now? In the middle of the breaking, you take one honest step at a time. You keep showing up, even with shaking hands. You let yourself grieve what was lost, without labeling yourself as weak. You talk to God like you would talk to a trusted friend, not a distant judge. You dare to believe that your story is not over, that the author has not set down the pen, and as you keep walking, you may one day look back and realize something powerful. The season that almost broke you was the season that built you. The place you thought was your ending became the birthplace of your true beginning. Brokenness did not disqualify you. It was the very way God prepared you for who you were always meant to become. So if you are standing among the pieces right now, do not rush to sweep them away. Let God touch them. Let him rebuild you, not into who you were before, but into who you truly are. One day, you will look back and know, the breaking did not destroy you. It opened the door to your destiny. In a deeper way,